per treatment. So if you're spending $900 on the phosphate binder, that's that's like 3 bundle payments, or almost 3 bundle payments. There are only 13 bundle payments a month, so there's going to be some cost considerations that large dialysis providers will have to take into account.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. So I think we can switch gears now. You already mentioned a little bit of your opinion here, but I wanted to talk about the patients, the chronic kidney disease patients not on dialysis who have iron deficiency anemia. Right. Similar line of questioning. How do you evaluate or diagnose these patients as being anemic?
Well, before you put them on an ESA, as like Procrit or Aranesp, you get an iron panel. You see what their ferritin level is. You see what their iron saturation is. You see what the total iron binding capacity is. And if these patients have low ferritins, a low iron concentration, and a low TIBC, those are the patients that you have to put on iron along with the ESA to get a maximum effect. It's not all that common that these patients are deficient in iron or have a low ferritin, because they probably were given iron by their previous doctors before they get to the nephrologist, thinking there was iron deficiency anemia and giving them iron with no good response. But again, if the patient is anemic and has a low ferritin and a low iron saturation, it's rather costly to give these patients Auryxia as a source of iron.
Okay. What is your management approach there if it's not Auryxia?
I would put them on ferrous sulfate, or tell them to eat, iron-rich foods such as red meat or spinach as a source of iron. I mean, giving them, ferrous sulfate they have to take it with a meal. Sometimes it's constipating. There was an IV preparation, IV iron, that I used to use a few years ago, but it had some problems with alleged anaphylaxis, and it's off the market. But I think there are cheaper ways to give patients iron as opposed to Auryxia.
Okay. I think there is a form of IV iron still available. Do you use that at all, or how do you decide the oral iron?
No, I've used it, but it's easier to get the oral iron. You don't have to have a prior authorization. And unless the patient is very vociferous about constipation, there's really no reason to change it.
Okay. And you find that the oral iron is effective for the most part?
There's no literature to support the avoidance of iron either in chronic kidney disease or even end-stage renal disease as a source of iron for patients on ESAs.
Okay. So you've mentioned ESAs a couple of times, and I know there's been some recent data speaking to the increased risk, I think particularly with stroke, with the use of those agents. Has that changed your approach to treating these patients at all?
I mean, I keep them, between 10 and 11. The thing is, those patients with chronic kidney disease have LVH, left ventricular hypertrophy, if they're anemic. And that's one of the reasons patients have a high mortality going from stage 3 to stage 4, is because patients with left ventricular hypertrophy don't do as well as those patients without it. So if you give them an ESA and you get their hemoglobin up from 8.5 or 9 to 10 or 10.5, you can reverse some of the LVH, and that leads to a longer lifespan as opposed to those patients that have LVH that's not treated.
Okay. So you don't see Auryxia as an option for potentially reducing the use of ESAs and kind of avoiding that additional risk. You still think that those agents are necessary as long as they're managed appropriately. Is that fair?
If you manage them appropriately, I think they're fine. I mean, patients on hemodialysis are sicker than the rest of the population.